Hey, so let's talk about cervical position, why you might check it, and just do a little bit of a visual to help you get an idea of how this works. So, cervical position checking is most intimidating to people because A, it's like physically invasive. It's a bit more physically demanding, I suppose, than taking your temperature or just checking for mucus when you go to the bathroom. But it's a really helpful tool to have if A, body literacy and knowing as much as possible is valuable to you. If B, maybe you are struggling with taking your temperature. Maybe you have a kid that wakes you up a lot in the night, or you are just struggling with sleep at the moment, which is common when you're going through HA recovery. Maybe you wake up at different times every day. Like sometimes you wake up at 9 a.m., sometimes you wake up at 6. These little things are going to skew your temperature readings, and they're going to make them less reliable, yet less useful of a tool. Now, you might also have issues with checking cervical mucus. Perhaps you always have mucus, which is something that I see in clients a lot, and that's something that we're working through. It's like a situation we're trying to solve. So in the meantime, while we're trying to solve it, it's not working as a tool for identifying ovulation. And maybe you're rarely seeing mucus, if ever, like just such a small amount that your mucus observations are also moot. So if one or both of those tools are out of action for you, checking cervical position is valuable. So if you could basically be checking mucus and temperature, mucus and cervical position, or temperature and cervical position. Like using 2 out of the 3 methods is the best reason. And the reason for that is because of what we call the cross-check method. And the cross-check just means you're using more than one sign or symptom in order to reference each other to confirm ovulation. So if you're just using temperature, just using cervical position, you might have a situation 1 month where like something weird happens and now that tool's out the window. Like for some reason, your mucus patterns are like, you're just not seeing what you usually see. And so you have nothing else to compare it to see, if you did ovulate. But if you were using both cervical position and cervical mucus checking, you would be able to maybe fall back and rely on what you're seeing in the cervical position, or fall back and rely on what you're seeing in the temperature. So that's one of the reasons. And it's totally up to you which combination you choose to use. The thing with cervical checking that intimidates people is because it's kind of like, I don't know what I'm looking for. And I remember when I first checked my cervix, I was like, that felt stupid. But it's not. So what I want you to know is that it's something that takes practice. Checking every single day is going to basically give you information that as you accumulate more and more reps, more and more days of checking your cervix, you will start to notice the changes, and you'll have all of this information from these past checks in your brain stored in there as data, and you'll be able to start finally noticing the shifts. And it's one of those things where it feels the same for many days, and then when the shift finally happens, you're like, oh, okay. And when you have HA, it might take, or it probably will take, a much longer time for you to see that shift, because you're essentially in a prolonged pre-ovulatory or follicular phase. You haven't ovulated yet. You haven't had, or maybe you have, you haven't ovulated yet. Maybe you've had a bleed and you haven't ovulated, but you were checking your cervix, and so you still feel like you didn't find or notice any shifts. And all of that you're going to figure out by going down the path of learning this method and practicing this method. Hopefully that made sense. So the reason I wanted to do this video was just to show you a quick demo of what you're kind of looking for with the cervical position changes. So your cervix actually changes its physical position throughout the month. Your body's going through a cycle, and so is the position of your cervix. So I always think of it kind of like a clock. It's like going around. So let's imagine this is your cervix. Your cervix has a larger side and a smaller side, and the smaller end is the entrance, essentially, of your cervix. And this is the bit that's like opening up for conception, for labor, for pushing a baby out of the canal. So this is kind of like your whole cervix. And during the month, it's like asleep is kind of a good way to think of it, right? It's like it's lying down. It's an easy way to think of it. So when you come in to feel, you might feel it's like on an angle, it's lower, it's easier to find, it's really firm and hard, and because it's closed, it's shut. And then as the month progresses and you approach ovulation, you might find that or you should find that it shifts into a higher position, more awake. So when you reach into feel, you'll kind of feel it's different, and it's not so hard. It's now soft, a bit softer, and it's opening up a little bit. And if you've ever had a baby, it might already be a bit open, be a bit open in any position because it's just stretched, but it will open a bit wider. And then when ovulation has finished, it will start to go back down. So you're entering into the vagina to feel for the tip of this cervix and find, has it changed position and has it changed to soft or firm? And one thing to remember with this is it's subjective, right? So my soft could feel a little different to yours. And the good thing is you'll never feel my cervix. So it's kind of one of those things that you need to practice and do reps about and figure out what your firm and your soft is and what your cervical position is, because everyone's pelvis is different, our anatomy varies, so it really is very individual. So doing it every single day is going to give you the information over time that you need to be really fluent in the language that is your cervix. So I hope that was helpful.